have a very intimate discussion. We hope you'll join us with questions through this discussion. Yeah, I'll simply join my fellow panelists because I'll see it as we're all in this together, aren't we? Now, I should maybe introduce a little bit more. And Hala has a background of 27 years in aviation, in also some academic training with a Bachelor in Business Administration from Alexandria University, I believe. But is primarily working with emergency response planning, which of course is one of the consequences if safety doesn't work, but a very wide experience in the aviation industry. And in terms of Stephen, I've concluded that he must have a background as a Secret Service agent because I looked for information, I found absolutely nothing other than his title. So, you know,
that's good.
He's probably some Bond-like character, right? So, but we won't go more into that because if he has to tell us, then he has to kill us as well. So we know we're going to do that. So I'll simply join you here. So, and what I'd like to start with is sort of a broad question. I mean, the theme here is how do we collaborate effectively to improve safety? So if either of you, and I'll throw it to Hala first, would you like to start with, if I ask you, what do you see as some of the greatest safety challenges of today, and how could cooperation in the industry support improving safety in those areas?
Thank you very much, Nicklas. Actually, when it comes to the reality between ERP and safety, people tend to put a wall between safety and emergency response planning, when the reality is emergency response planning enhances the safety as per the ICAO safety management system component and framework. In every stage of this component, we will find the emergency response planning is there. So when it comes to, for example, the policies, the safety policies and objectives, we will find that this needs coordination with emergency response planning. When it comes to the safety management, risk management, then we will have the emergency response planning in the mitigation. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to the safety assurance stage, we will have the emergency response planning in managing the change. Mm-hmm. So it goes hand by hand with safety. It enhances the safety. To have a good safety management system, you should have a good emergency response plan in place. Mm-hmm. And you should ensure with this emergency response plan that you can pull out from the normal operations the resources required to manage the situation on the day. However, you do not jeopardize the normal operations going smoothly, as well as managing with this emergency response plan resources to go back to the normal situation in a very smooth and as soon as possible to minimize the risk to this normal operations, which is the vital objective of the safety when it comes to the objectives.
But in terms of cooperation then, using the word that it can be a wall, are you indicating that there could be a problem? Because an accident is so hard to imagine, so when you look at emergency response planning and you see a risk upstream that could prevent it from happening, it can be difficult to communicate that to the other part of the organization.
When it comes to the upstream of safety, which is the prevention, ERP does contribute to the prevention as well, because having a good plan is preventing the high risk of the normal operations to be disturbed by the diversion of attention to this normal operations due to the occurrence of the situation. So that's why we work with the upstream of the safety, which is the prevention, as well as the downstream, which is the reaction when it comes to the mitigation, the managing of the situation, saving lives, maintaining the required resources from the normal operations to participate in the situation on the day, as well as having these resources going back to normal with the most smooth and quick way as possible. So this is how we go from the upstream to the downstream of safety when it comes to the emergency response planning. It's not only when it takes place, then when we are mopping out and when we're dealing with the situation as it happens, it's preventing and minimizing the damage as much as possible and saving lives, which the prime objective of safety.
Now, that's very interesting, and I'll link that to my question to Stephen here. I just looked up a few stats, and there's about 1 million traffic deaths on this planet every year. There's about 500,000 deaths by falling. So basically, if you get out your home, get to your car, when you get onto the aircraft, you can really breathe out because you're fine, basically. You're far more likely to be killed in your home than in your car. Now, given our success with safety, which has been phenomenal, how does that affect you, Stephen, in selling equipment which is basically there to enhance safety further?
Yeah, so maybe I should clear up my background first, since I work at Honeywell, and I've spent most of my career in the support side of things and moved into sales recently. And had a mechanical background, and so moving into the wonderful world of avionics is a great excitement for me. And I'm often inspired by the products that we have around safety, and I think this is a no-brainer. This should be really easy to go and sell, but I'm finding that it's not that easy. And part of the reason for that, I think we heard in the discussion before around that cost benefit, right? And we've got a session this afternoon where I'll be talking about smart runway, smart landing, which for me is one of those things that you should really go and do. If you look at accident statistics, control flight into terrain is, I think, the second driver, but after that is runway incursions and excursions. And I think the industry is constantly seeking to advance safety and go after each and every failure mode as it can. And I think that's the purpose of what we do. Now, when it comes to making those decisions at an airline, that investment, the way the process often goes is that those decisions are made during an aircraft selection, a buyer-furnished equipment selection, and those tend to be dominated by purchasing and engineering folks, with some representation from flight ops. And so that's something that I'm seeing quite a lot, and I think it's very important that the flying community is part of that decision. And I think it's extremely important that organizations like Honeywell make sure that when they develop products and value propositions, that there's a lot of dialogue up front to make sure that that is something that's going to work economically for the airline, but also going to address safety. So.
All right, if we move that a little bit to the theme of collaboration, because collaboration is, we all want to collaborate, we all want to say that we collaborate, but there can be obstacles. So if I start with Hala there, emergency response planning, we should all share, we all want to, if an accident happens, we want to limit the effects as much as possible. But certainly there must be limitations on and obstacles to sharing as well. How have you experienced those?
I believe in the aviation industry, when it comes to the emergency response planning, sharing of information, there is no competition in emergency response planning. And however, there is restrictions when it comes to the restrictions you face with regulators or the operators, whether it's airlines or airports, with the passengers and the press and the claims, and when you get the restrictions from the legal department and the insurance and whatsoever. However, in emergency response planning, I don't think there is anything that you need to hide, because what happens, regardless with what happens. As far as the information is correct and verifiable, then you could share this to a big extent in the aviation industry. However, when it comes to sharing, we, for example, in the Arab Air Carrier Organization, we started a mutual assistance agreement which let all the Arab Air Carrier members, airline members, having signed for this agreement, share their resources, share their support, share their training and modules and exercise results and debriefs, which means that there is no problem in sharing information. This will enhance the general safety in the aviation industry when it comes to the start with the emergency response planning.
Okay, but let me make it a little bit more difficult for you. I guess I could argue that if you tell me what your emergency response planning about, and that is about you have assessed certain risks from the beginning, then that would reveal also to me some of the weaknesses you might have in your organization. I mean, if it was an open media landscape and a journalist got hold of your emergency response planning, they could throw on the front page saying, you know, Gulf Air preparing for da-da-da-da-da. So certainly, I appreciate it's great, the transparency, the cooperation that you talk about is great, but certainly there must be some limitation to it.
When I meant by sharing, I meant sharing within the aviation industry, not really publicizing our emergency response plan. The emergency response plan is an internal document that it should not be really widely shared. However, in the aviation industry, among airlines, among operators, there is no harm of sharing the plans, and that will give chance for development, modification, amendment, corrections, which is, I think, acceptable in that level.
Excellent. All right. Now, as being a business in technology, there's certainly, and I'm sure you try to cooperate with your customer as much as ever possible. But again, what if you can you outline the potential for cooperation and where it possibly can grow, and also where sort of are the limitation? Where does it get difficult?
So I think if I take smart runway, smart landing again as an example, I think it's very powerful when airlines and the OEMs like ourselves talk to each other and share data. I think that helps both sides. It helps us develop our products on the one hand. It helps the airline evaluate the risks more clearly and evaluate the product against those risks and make the right options. So I think collaborating in that way helps both sides. I shouldn't say sides, both partners, shall we say. I think there's always perhaps it's because everybody's extremely busy, right? Nobody has spare time to spend these days in development activities as much as perhaps we used to. But I think that's where the real benefits lie. I think, as I say, it helps us develop those value propositions that then can work for the airline. So I think that's where the collaboration. Now, it does mean that you have to open up your books a little bit. You have to have trust, and you have to have that common understanding of what you're trying to work to. I think there's a fear sometimes that if you let somebody like a sales guy from Honeywell in, they're going to sell you something that you don't need or you don't want, and that's simply not possible, unfortunately. And so I think there's just benefits in that collaboration. And we'll be showing a video this afternoon in the session which talks to that collaboration, where the customer is very happy with what they got, and we're also very happy with that too.
Excellent, thank you. I would like to link up to, since we're talking about safety in general, not only in specific fields, the previous session talked about risk and perception of risk. So rather than your specific roles right now, your experience, even back to mechanical stuff, and for Hala from 27 years of experience, in terms of the perception of risk in aviation, it's a challenge. How do you stay aware of risk when things are going so well? You have any thoughts of that? I mean, you both travel and meet different parts of the aviation industry. Any thoughts on that, Hala?
I believe, with all my respect to the safety measures and the risk management measures, we have to believe that, again, I sing and dance emergency response planning, so I think it's very healthy to believe that it will take place. It might take place, and in case it takes place, then what if, what we would contribute, what would be the plan, what would be the checklist in case it takes place. So I'm not thinking of only the responsive measures. We think of the preventive measures as well, but we deliver the preventive measures in emergency response planning by having the plan ready for when it happens.
So having the plan alone and coming back to it keeps that awareness that an accident can happen alive?
Having this belief that it could happen, that makes you review constantly your plan, think of different scenarios, think of different risks, and be prepared for it. Enhancing your preparedness level will come from the belief that it could happen.
Yes.
And when it happens, then what?
Very good. So on that brings, that's the difficult message you have to get across. You have to basically go to a customer and say, things can happen and we have the equipment to prevent that.
But I also can personalize it myself. So in preparation for coming here, I was reading up as much as I could, of course, and I came across a statement that if we don't make changes to the air traffic management system as the passenger growth continues, in Europe, the risk of a mid-air collision would go up to once every 3 years, right? So when you see statistics like that and you personalize those, I'm going to be traveling on, I think, 8 flights in the next 7 days, and that's something that I take very seriously as an individual, and I think the industry does too. And so I would like, as a passenger and as a consumer, that the airline is doing absolutely everything it can do to mitigate those known risks, right?
So to keep those thoughts alive and keep the risk awareness alive, internalizing and personalizing is one method to do that simply.
Absolutely.
Yeah, excellent. On that note, and with the risk of stealing information from your session later today, if we look at the longer safety perspective, and I know you have products right now, would you be willing to divulge any information on the vision of Honeywell in terms of safety and technology? What is the potential, where are the limitations there?
So first of all, Honeywell is one of the partners in the CESAR program in Europe.
Yep.
And so that's something that we're working on and will be intimately involved in the development of the air traffic management system going forward. So a key partner there. We've come out recently with some weather enhancements for our weather radar around hazard avoidance for hail, and we continue to push that envelope. One of the products that we're excited about is also what we call Wind Plus, which is weather on board. Again, giving pilots through an EFB solution the ability to see weather throughout the entire trip, and also eventually to receive weather data from other aeroplanes on coming back on the same route, kind of thing. So I think all that kind of activity is exciting, and those are the areas, for example, that Honeywell is working with, and many more, of course.
Thank you very much. Hala, relating to your 27 years, and which I take is very much in the region here as well, and on the same note, if you compare your experience to where you see, what do you see as the future challenges for safety in this region? Both the present one, but also if you extrapolate them out forwards, what do you see as the challenge there?
I think the challenge will be to have a safety culture, understanding. We inherited some beliefs that it does not really help the safety concept as such, and we need to develop and open up for new concepts and new belief, and work on it and believe in it. This will help the safety so much in the region, and I think we've started already in the region to believe that safety is quite a vital element in our life generally, and when it comes to the aviation industry specifically. And yeah, so.
Yeah. On the topic of collaboration, we now discussed collaboration within the industry. I just like to add that I last week had nuclear safety people from the nuclear plants being built in this country visiting me. And also a few weeks ago, I spoke at a medical simulation conference. And I think there's enormous potential in cooperation also, not only within the industry, but without the industry. I guess that must be something in Honeywell has products in many different areas. Is that anything that, I'm throwing you curveballs now, as the expression is. Yeah. If you're only in aviation, that's fine, but have you had any?
I wished I paid more attention to those other businesses. Yeah.
All right.
But we do, so we have quite a strong presence here in Dubai.
Yes.
We have building solutions, airport solutions situated here. And so I think, particularly on the airport activities here in Dubai, there's an awful lot of collaboration between the aerospace division and the building solutions and airports division. So that is something that does exist. That's true. May I ask you a question?
Sure, go ahead.
So what do you think OEMs could do differently in terms of approaching an airline like Emirates with safety products?
I think the role is still very traditional, someone selling and someone buying. Yeah. I think the cooperation element, I think you expressed it very well. I think it's very limited. I think there is very limited cooperation, and we really need to do more. I'm a researcher myself. I try to sort of get in contact to do research, but simply the legal limitation. I can honestly say, and it's sort of semi-secret, so I shouldn't say it on a stage, but I'm right now in contact with the researchers at Boeing about doing research together with them. And that is 3 months ago, and we're still trying to get a non-disclosure agreement that fits both sides legally. Yeah. So, and that's, I think, it's the discrepancy, what we sit here and say about cooperation and how worthy it is, and how difficult it can be to really realize. And I think we really need to make the legal obstacles smaller to cooperation. Right. That would be my own personal, very recent experience.
Thanks.
Yeah. Hala? I'm still thinking of your experience as a trainer. Again, if we look to the future of safety and seeing new generations coming in, could you sense any difference in how they see safety as people might have done a decade or more ago?
Definitely, mentalities are changed now. The new generation, they do absorb the new and digest the new concept of safety, and they do realize the importance of the safety measures to be carried out, to be simulated, to be exercised and practiced. So that makes it much easier. And I think with the constant practice, safety is not only, nowadays safety is regulations and process and procedures more than best practice in the aviation industry now. So we need to deliver this, get it delivered properly, and I think the new generation are capable of digesting and developing and participating in the training process much better than 15 years ago.
Something that from my own research, and I often would like to argue, is that it's important that safety becomes a pride for an organization, not only something you do, but something you're proud to do. Something is integrated in the professional role, that a pilot, an engineer, an air traffic controller see themselves as safety workers and can communicate across borders as working with safety, not only as in their own professional role. Now, again, and I know you've changed your roles many times, would that be a development you've seen in terms on the engineering side, or in case of the different positions you had, Hala, the difference of safety as an add-on, something I have to do while I do my job, or something that is an integrated and an important part of my job.
So safety and efficiency, often the two go together.
Exactly.
Right? Is one of the core values that we have in the company. It's what our products are designed to go and address most of the time. And so yes, that is part of what we do. At an individual level, again, to personalize it, when you're in the day-to-day, as we often are, dealing with issues and whatever it is, the moments of pride that I experience are when we're presenting something about our safety products, or I'm sat next to somebody on an airplane and I explain what we do and how we get them there safely. So that is something that I think should be a rally cry for most organizations in this industry.
Very nice. And Hala, on the same note, in terms of pride and how you make it an integrated component and not an add-on to your professional role?
I think that it comes with not only the requirement, but as you said, it comes with the efficiency, the being efficient enough, being professional enough, being an airline with a reputation of your safety level and your safety standards. I think it's becoming more than the competition as well among the airlines now and the operators when it comes to safety is quite an active competition nowadays, and it leaves you with no chance but to follow the current requirement and the current regulations, procedures. Sometimes you cannot even do without the minimum, and the minimum is quite developed to the minimum that it used to be a while ago. So I think it will determine not only the continuation and the image of the airline, but it will determine your day-to-day operations when it comes to the safety standards and regulations.
Excellent. We'll be happy to take any questions from the floor at this point. Oh, we have one already. I'm delighted. Thank you, sir. If we get a mic to the gentleman in the middle here.
Hi, my name is Afwork, and I'm working for AT&R Airways and studying in City University. It's regarding the emergency safety response plan. I think most of the airlines, especially Emirates, is flying, AT&R, Qatar, they are flying into Africa. And in Africa, we have a lot of landing and takeoffs by these airlines. How much sure you are here in this, IATA or be it the responsible guys here, how much sure are you this emergency safety program is properly implemented in Africa, and if something happens, how much, have you ever tried to share information or try to train those people who are responsible in those parts of Africa or be it Asia, or we're just working here and in Europe and in the US only? Is there anything which has been going on? Because I've read some articles in some parts of Africa where they don't have a proper emergency response plan, and a lot of Middle Eastern airlines are flying. Okay.
I think that's one for you, Hala.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I would like to draw your attention that it's not only the region, it's not only the Arab air carriers, it's the IATA Emergency Response Taskforce, which if you are an IATA member, then you should be having an access to the IATA Emergency Response Taskforce SharePoint, and you will get all the experiences, all the documents, all the inquiries that you may face and need an advice or a support with this inquiry. So I would advise you to have the access point for the IATA SharePoint, which is mainly for the emergency response planning for all the IATA members.
I would actually like to answer a little bit to that as well. In the conference today is Captain Samir Zayed of the UN World Food Programme. I have had the fortune of working with the World Food Programme for a number of years now. They started out with an extremely risky operation. They had a string of accidents, and this is more than a decade ago. And even in this risky situation, landing on what we no way could call runways, you wouldn't recognize it as a runway, in the most risky places on the planet, they have turned that risky operation to one of the most safe operations with an admirable work of implementing in these small operators they contract, safety management system, crew resource management training, and even now standing at putting in FRMS systems for fatigue management in place. If there's anything you can learn about how to make safe operations, risky operations safe in Africa, I urge you to talk to the World Food Programme, because they've done fantastic work on that. Questions from the left and center?
Okay, hello, my name is Naushad. About strengthening the air safety, a very quick note, please. I just want to ask some question from the representative from the Honeywell. Previously, people used to work, mostly they were working about everything, and then something would go wrong, they will correct it. But now, whether they are pilots or they are controllers, the machines are doing everything, and when something goes wrong, they say, oh, do something about it. Now, we are addicted to this technology. And when we talk about strengthening the safety, apparently I feel myself as a target, as a human. Oh my God, that it's me who's going to make an error all the time. So while we have seen that in flying, that the simulators are there for training people for failures, what kind of human training program is there for the lower level of staff or the mid-managers while they make errors in decision making or in situational awarenesses, which can be very detrimental to safety overall for the organization? So is there anything which technology can provide us for training people for failures as well, whereas we are going pretty fast in expecting that everything will go right all the time?
So can I just clarify your question in terms of situational awareness in the cockpit, or are you talking about somewhere?
About the cockpit, I think we are doing a lot over there. But when it comes to the ground response team, emergency response teams, training programs, and even for as low as the drivers or the technology which we provide to the mid managers in the safety program, are there any technology-based trainings for failure responses as well? Because we generally expect that everything will go right, and these people are not really trained. We have seen that in our part of the world, that when something goes wrong in an automated environment, because it is really very difficult to monitor something which seldom fails. So when seldom fails, but when it fails, then there is a catastrophe, or there is a lot of shock over there. So whenever we introduce the concept in Honeywell, for example, is there where they introduce systems where they also give training that when they will fail, something will be done about it.
So I think your question is more directed to ground staff and that area. So a typical response, I think, is to look at technology around managing ground vehicles, technology around enhancing situational awareness of the wingtips of the aeroplane, that kind of thing. You're almost talking about simulator training for ground movements, I think, which is an interesting concept and something that we should actually take away. But we haven't looked at that area specifically, but it's a great comment.
I believe I can respond a little bit to that as well. Sorry for breaking in again,
yeah.
But I think the question is here, what for those people who don't work with anything topical, where there is a flight simulator, where there is some form of engineering simulator or an air traffic control simulator, what support, technological support or training opportunities can be provided by organizations who develop technology as Honeywell? And on that note, I can refer to some of my own research. Simple simulation which is non-topical, has an enormous power and is not used in this industry now. And I can say that with some confidence because the responsible person for the emergency response planning in Emirates is sitting in this room, Jill Sparrow. We are later this year going to do a ship simulation with the top emergency response planners in Emirates. And you might say, why a ship simulation? What has to do with an aircraft or even less an airline? This is a ship simulation developed by a German university to train team decision making. It is incredibly effective. It's very low tech, very low fidelity, but it's incredibly effective. And it's effective because it's not about an aircraft or an airline. When you sit in your normal situation, you have all your procedures, all your technology to help you, and you know your whole environment. You're not training decision making, you're not training communication or coordination because you have all your supports. If I pull you out of that environment and say, now, you're the captain of a ship, and here is the navigator, here is the da-da-da. Then people really have to train communication, coordination, decision-making, because you're taking away the supporting structure. This is an argument that has been well made in a couple of research articles by myself and some other fellow researchers. It has enormous potential. It has been applied in healthcare and in nuclear power plants, but somehow in aviation we think it must be an aircraft, it must be an airport, otherwise we're not training. And that is unfortunately wrong and counterproductive. Someone? Oh, there's one over there.
Hello, it's Martin Chalk again. The panel's about collaborating effectively. And one of the questions I would have from the panel is how you engender in a cultural environment. We all have a background culture wherever we come from in the world, or a multicultural environment, particularly in aviation, how you engender a separate reporting safety culture. Because the home culture, wherever that is from, will have an influence, and therefore it is a work of effort to overcome the natural culture, to engender that learning culture that a safety management system is or should be. And in particular, most jobs, most professions will have separate language, vocabulary, separate procedures that will be different to the way you would handle exactly the same challenge in your private life, in your professional life. And how do we arrange that in an airline to encourage people to report so that we have the data on which to make some of the decisions you've been discussing?
Well, given that I work in an airline with more than 100 nationalities represented in cockpit and 150 in the cabin, and I actually develop and deliver that culture training, I'll be happy to respond to that if that's okay. I'll simply hijack that one. Also because I'm moderating safety culture tomorrow, so thanks for the bridge for that. Well, that's probably require a long answer, but let me give you a short one. The first one is that diversity dissolves differences. You're better off in an airline like Emirates, where we have so many nationalities, because it stopped becoming a factor. If you have 2 or 3 strong nationalities within an organization, I think there can be real difficulties, or I know that from other operators I've been in contact with. But when you go to the next meeting and there's 20 new nationalities, and you go to the next meeting, there's 20 new, you stop thinking about it because there's too diverse. And that allows the platform to form that culture for the company, because national culture is so diverse that you end up not being able to keep track of it. Now, your question was also how you engender that culture, how you shape it. And it is, of course, with training. It's first of all creating curiosity about culture, give people the foundational knowledge to comment, to ask questions, to understand culture, and that creates a curiosity. From that base, you can then train the awareness of culture and then move that on to shaping the professional culture and the organizational culture. As you said, it's a blend of national, professional, and organizational culture. As long as you're aware of that and you set a goal, not a goal with an objective for a year, but an objective for 3 to 5 years where you want to be, then you can shape that culture.
Can I follow up and say that at one end of the scale, you have systems that are extremely tolerant to the point where people get away with unprofessional behavior. And at the other end of the scale, you have systems that are extremely intolerant and where people exist only by keeping their head down and not saying anything, not making a name for themselves in any sense.
Yep.
And neither of those are learning cultures. Even in the middle, where you might have an appropriate blend of carrot and stick, to try and put it gently, you would also have not a reporting learning culture, because people don't see any value, they don't report because they get nothing back from the system when they do. So I would like not to characterize this as a particular culture's problem. It is every culture's problem to ensure that their system is a learning one, where people feel confident that both their input will be valued and will not be used against them, and will result in something positive coming out of it. Thus, they get a reward back for their effort in making the report in the first place. And without those reports, our colleague over here who wants to improve the situation on the ground, anybody who wants to improve the situation in the flight deck, in fact, anybody who wants to improve safety levels such that our great industry can continue to grow and reduce its accident rate such that the number of accidents does not increase, in fact it should decrease, so that perception of risk is maintained as low in our industry, thus funding that growth. For all that to happen, we need a learning culture. And everybody, whether they're at the over-tolerant end, the over-intolerant end, or the bit in the middle that seems to be lethargic, they all need to engender that reporting culture. And I don't see that happening very positively in very many places.
Right. I hope you're on the panel for safety culture tomorrow.
I'll certainly be in the room.
So just commenting shortly on that at the end there. Yes, it needs to happen. It's not easy to engender a learning culture. We have a regulatory system that frames us in and prevents exploratory learning as a concept. What I can say, I sat in a meeting earlier today. We have a project in Emirates flight training where we intend to take a big step forward in training, and that is walking away from having these frames. We always tell we're going to go in this, we're going to do this in the training session, this in training session. And instead, I'll just give you one example. If we have a couple of 737 pilots coming to us, we would start as they know nothing, and we'll start teaching this, this, this. That's how we've done it. We want to move towards where in the first sim session we ask them, so you flew 7-3 before? Great. You know what? I'll leave you alone in the sim for half an hour. Then I come back and you tell me what are the things you think you know before and what are the things you think you need to know about the 777. If we can engender that type of learning culture in training, we can then cascade it over to other aspects. But if that's not there, if there's no understanding what learning is, if learning is just ticking off boxes or repeating things, as it has been in this industry for decades, if there's no exploratory element, we don't get the curiosity of learning, and we're certainly not going to get the reporting either. Right, with that, we're going to try to round off, and I've been given the liberty to round off with 2 videos, and they link very nicely to what both Stephen and Hala talked about in terms of safety and efficiency. So let's see how we can progress with efficiency over the decades, as we talked about. So if I may have my first video, I hope Nikki has someone. There she is, thank you.
But Holland comes in for a pit stop. Time to refuel and change tires. Lou Moore himself changes the tires. Only 4 crew members, including the driver, are allowed to work on the car. It's a tense time. Holland stays in his seat, anxious to get away. Let's watch. tires are changed at last. A crewman polishes the windshield as Holland moves away just 67 seconds after he stopped.
No. So the point I want to make to all of you safety leaders in this room, I've played this for a number of people when I've been consulting, and I can make a whole group of managers go, I ask them, do you want to be this team? And they go, yeah, we want to be efficient. Yeah, let's go for it. Everyone wants to be efficient. But we are all here in this room working with safety first. Let's have an example of how it goes when you're too efficient.
A Formula One cameraman is recovering in hospital after being struck by a wheel which flew off Mark Webber's Red Bull during a pit stop in the German Grand Prix on Sunday. Webber came into the pits for a routine tyre change after 9 laps, but his crew took longer than usual because of a problem with the right rear tyre. Webber was released without the wheel being secured properly, and it bounced into British cameraman Paul Allen.
As he gets away, and he's been waved, there's a wheel gone, and a wheel rolling down, and he's hit the cameraman on the back. I hope he's okay.
He suffered a broken collarbone, 2 broken ribs, concussion and bruises, and may have to stay in hospital for several days. Webber finished 7th, and his team were fined $38,000 for the unsafe release.
The point being that if you drive efficiency hard enough, you will have problem with safety. You might say, well, I'm sure they changed procedures. Yes, they did, and had the same incident a few months later. If you push things all the way, then you're going to have a problem with safety. So let's not ever take safety for granted. Thank you very much.